So I am absolutely honoured, humbled, and privileged to welcome for a chat that's been long coming. In all honesty, the reigning, defending, undisputed Masters Division Pokemon TCG World Champion, possibly even by proxy the longest reigning.
Yes, on a very big technicality, the longest reigning. Yes,
But here he is, Henry Brand. Henry, how you going, mate?
I'm going so well, thank you, man. Thanks
Oh,
for having me
good.
on. It's good. I mean, it's just good to catch up in general, but I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those who aren't aware, me and Henry, we met a long time ago in Australia. We went to school together. Before he was the great big household name that he is now. So I can certainly say that I knew him before he was famous. But so I've got you here, obviously with the Pokemon World Championships returning this season and coming up in just 4 months' time. I wanted to chat to you about kind of the worlds in general and the lead up that you've had to that. But I wanted to start off with, for those of you that aren't quite familiar, with your background. Okay, so tell me a little bit, if you could, about how you first started to get involved with the Pokemon TCG. What were your first impressions? What was your first kind of involvements?
Yeah, well, I think my first involvement with the whole Pokemon concept was when I was a kid. Like, as everyone, I was maybe like 4 years old. They sell Pokemon cards. They're probably fake, the ones I bought, but my parents would buy them, and I'd see like the pictures, and I'd be like, "Those are so cool, right?" I really like the creatures. Like, I always liked like dragons and all that stuff, and so I kind of learned to read. I wanted to learn to read the cards, and then I don't know, you just mess around with them as a kid. But then later on in high school, I found out there were tournaments for it, and I went to some, and I was like, well, this is kind of fun. So I played as a kid. It's called the senior division, so like the 12 to 15 age group. I went to Worlds for that. It didn't do too great. Then I kind of stopped for a couple of years, and then a few years later, when I was 19, and one of my friends is like, oh, come to this tournament, the Oceanic International Championships. There's 4 international championships a year in the circuit, and this was the one in the city I live in Melbourne. And I was like, sure, why not? So I came and I placed top 8 out of about 400 people, I want to say. And that was sweet. And I was like, hey, this was like kind of fun. I'll go to the next one. And so I went to the next regional, and I ended up winning that one. And then if you're ranked high, they actually, in the leaderboards, they pay for you to travel to the next major tournament. And so it kind of snowballed from there. And I got really into it.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a lot of things to unpack there as well. I love the fact and the idea that you initially used Pokemon to learn, like to read and things like that. How much of a benefit do you think, for not only just like as someone playing casually and trying to introduce family to the game, but like generally as like a learning tool and a community builder? Do you think that this game has played?
I think it's actually really, really good. There's some really interesting concepts within the game that it teaches better than maybe you could in a normal setting. So I teach the game a lot. So I coach people from kids to adults, and a lot of the things that there's a lot of concepts like probability and things like that. When taught in a formal school setting, kids kind of hate them and they might not understand. But when it's applied, it's actually not too bad. And so I think that's really interesting. And obviously, like the reading is an incentive, but there's a lot of basic maths in the game. There's a lot of more intuitive things, and you do end up finding that the kids end up like learning a fair bit just from playing it anyway. And obviously, any kind of competitive pursuit, especially involving strategy, like chess, is always lauded as a really good educational tool. Not only through like the strategy, but also through the, I guess, tournament mindset and competitive, thought processes that you develop, and the resilience.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I was one of those that started traditionally with chess and that kind of thing. So I think we've now got an official seal of approval for TCG to be taught in primary schools. I wanted to pick up on that competitive instinct, that competitive mindset that you touched on there. Can you remember the first tournament for Pokemon TCG that you went to, and how that kind of competitive mindset evolved from back then in your debut, of it, as it were, to now getting set to defend your title?
Yeah, I mean, geez, it's a long time back. I think the first competitive TCG tournament I remember was a long time ago, and I think I went and I'd taken a deck idea from a friend, and so for anyone who's not aware, you bring your own deck to a tournament, so it's your own strategy, and I'd kind of taken it from someone else, and I hadn't worked on it much myself, and just did it, and I didn't do terribly well. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't end up performing well, and obviously I was young at the time. But then for the next tournament, I was like, okay, I'm not listening to other people. Like I'm gonna work on this myself, and I put the time in, and I really honed my own strategy. I figured out what I thought was good. I practiced a lot against myself actually, and so I went into the next tournament with a lot more confidence, and I felt even if I didn't do as well, I felt like it was a more authentic kind of win because I'd put more effort in personally, and obviously I ended up doing better as a result as well. And so I guess I stuck through that all the way into the future, and I would always try and come up with my own strategy to play for tournaments, and then kind of carried through.
Yeah. Was that the Aromatisse deck, chance?
Yes, it
It
was.
was because I
Yeah.
remember you building that, and I remember you writing the article for, oh, was it 60 cards?
It was some Australia one. I think it was Ace Trainer. It was called. Yeah.
Ace Trainer, that was it. I knew it was one or the other because you write for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so interesting. So I suppose then going through and you progressing in your career, I suppose, you said you've obviously made the first world appearance with, I believe it was either Pyroar or Blastoise, correct?
Yeah, I played Pyroar, Landorus, and that was again a deck that I came up with myself, and it did not go well.
No,
it did not go well.
I remember you saying that out of about 1,000+ people that were attending Worlds that year, you ran into probably all 4 Blastoise decks.
Something like that
on day one.
Yeah.
But then I suppose feeding forwards and continuing on, like you said, you pushed on, you played in OCIC and top 8'd that. And then you make it to Worlds. You get that qualification, you get the auto travel, like you were saying. In the days and months leading up to that, what was your thought process? Was it, okay, I'm just going to go there and enjoy it? Or was it like, okay, now let's actually, let's give this a real go?
I think if you talk to pretty much anyone who's won anything major in any sport, they did not just go to have fun. No, I did not just go to have fun. I was like, if I'm going to do this, and this is my mindset when it comes to this stuff, I'm never just going to play for fun. If I'm going to an event, I'm not going to waste my time, right? I'm going to put a lot of effort in because otherwise I'm not going to be happy with the result.
Sure.
If I put a lot of effort in and I don't do well, well, that's okay. I can learn from it, or it just wasn't my day. Like there's plenty of ways you can feel okay with it. But going to a tournament and just kind of like half-assing it and then not doing well is just, yeah, not a good reflection of yourself. And so I went, I had the tournament well in advance. And I actually had some rough tournaments leading up to it. There was a big tournament in America, the North American International Championships, where I worked together with someone and we had a really good deck. I came up with this cool idea that I really liked, and I did really poorly. Obviously, in a card game, there is elements of luck and just didn't quite go my way. But my friend ended up winning, and I was like, like next time it's got to be me. Like, I got to do it. And so I worked really, really hard for Worlds and the weeks leading up to it, and I was like, I was pretty confident, and as I'm sure a lot of people are, I was confident in the fact that I know that I feel like I'm good enough to do well at Worlds. I just have to prepare well and have a good day. And obviously I didn't want to just leave it up to the ladder. So put a lot of time in and came up with, a strategy that I liked, and went into the day and I felt really confident, and it panned out.
Yeah. And it certainly did. You go into that day and you get the first win, 1 win turns to 2, 2 win turns to 4, and all of a sudden you're in the top 8 of a world championships on that day 3. What was your mind? How did you feel going to bed that night, knowing you'd secured entry into that championship Sunday, and then waking up and sort of trying to go through the motions on the day prior to your quarterfinal?
Well, here's the thing. You were talking about earlier about an automatic qualification into the second day of competition. Now, with the World Championships, you have to get a certain amount of circuit points to qualify for the first day. And then you're to play 8 rounds of competition, I believe. And then whoever wins 6 games out of those 8 go to the second day. But if you're ranked high enough in your region, so for us, it was top 8 in Oceania, you skip straight to that second day. And that is a massive, massive burden off in so many ways, because you get to see some strategies from the first day, but you also just save so much energy on a really like exhausting, grueling thing, because the rounds are 50 minutes. It's pure concentration. And, you know, like playing for 8-9 hours a day is exhausting. Now, however, that being said, on the second day, we actually played quarterfinals and semifinals in the same day as the rounds. So I had to play 7 rounds of Swiss, so play against 7 different people. I was lucky enough to win the first 5, and from there, I knew I was safe to make it into the quarterfinals just from that record. It was a blessing to start like that. Just the confidence you have is really good, and so I made it in. But then you have to play quarterfinals straight away, and so I think about 8 o'clock that night, I started playing quarterfinals, 8 p.m. So we started at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and started quarterfinals, and it was good. It just kind of worked, you know what I mean? Like you have these tournaments, and a top player will win each major tournament, but it won't always be the same one, because you have to have a good day. And everything felt right for me. Like there was just no other way to put it. And after that, I was like, we're good, we're done. And the big thing is to make it the top 4, because not only do prizes like jump massively every single time, but you get a return trip to the next year's World Championships, and you get a trophy, and you get everything. So top 4 is the goal, right? And so you got there, and people are like, you did it, you're top 4. And I was like, I'm not gonna think of it like that. Like it's one game at a time until we're done playing. Yeah. And so then top 4, finished that. Top 4 was really good. I actually ended up making a bit of a gameplay error. Like I drew 7 cards instead of 6. And I got a penalty, and it almost made me lose. Like I was totally safe to win if it wasn't for that. And then anyway, we fine. I called it back, and then we were through to the finals, and that was on Sunday. And I think I had about 3 hours sleep that night. being generous. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting as well. I wanted to just touch back on what you were saying about your gameplay, or I suppose foul for those that are uninitiated or aren't quite up with the lingo. How do you mentally reset from something like that? Because like you said, you were already in prime, peak flow state, if you will, to win this game. You know your combos, you know your outs, you know exactly what the game plan's got to be. And then something is unexpected, and something is just sort of almost second nature in a way, to just like draw the extra card and go, hang on a second. How do you in your own mind go, right, okay, drop that, get back, I've got to climb and take this out here?
I think I was lucky in the sense that whilst it did give my opponent a chance to win, I was still in the driver's seat. I think if it was worse, I would have definitely panicked. But I think honestly, in all of those situations, it was too nerve-wracking to even be nervous. I don't know if that's quite a way to explain it. It's just like you just get in such a zone that you can't be nervous. You can't afford to be. How can you? Like, if you get nervous, you're going to lose. Like, you just can't. And I guess it just didn't even cross my mind that I should be nervous. And of course I was, but it wasn't to a point that I guess really impacted me. And, like I'd been in the finals of big things before, and I wasn't on camera. I wasn't the match on camera. So a lot of live broadcasted, but my one wasn't. So I was off. But I guess it was pretty nerve-wracking, because it did end up going to game 3 in the end. I think I had a really rough game 1, I think, in a matchup that I thought was good. And I had, like everyone watching me, like all my friends and even like some relatives, and all watching from far away. And they're like, someone had like binoculars trying to see what's going on. But I mean, I just had to, you know what I mean? There's no like, how do you do it? You just kind of have to in the moment. And I guess you just do. Adapt or die, as they say. Like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I definitely. I think if I was in that hall there, I would have been hanging from the rafters with some binoculars and a walkie-talkie as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it gets to Championship Sunday. You play your grand final against Shintaro Ito, which obviously the game itself, it was talked about a lot at the time. but I think that that's been dealt with, I think is fair to say, and everything's kind of water under the bridge.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think that I mean, obviously, what you're referencing is that there was a foul in the finals in the card game. In order to maintain integrity and not have anyone manipulate the clock, there are penalties if you play too slow. Now, my opponent had received a few in previous rounds, and then on the finals, they took a really long time for one particular decision. And now, obviously, they weren't doing that in a nefarious context.
No.
But it's not certain whether the ones in the previous rounds were or weren't. And so just by the rule book, like they have to keep that. And given the previous warnings, it was escalated in the finals. So I did get a slight advantage in game one. I ended up winning the series 2-0 convincingly. So it's best of three. And so there wasn't any real doubt there anyway. And I was favored to win that game, that I got the advantage, but it still cast a lot of doubt. And this person had won, Shintaro had won the World Championships before. And so he had a bit of a following, and people were really kind of keen. But it made a little bit of controversy. But I think that honestly, looking back, I've obviously watched the match a few times. I've gone over it, done like some analysis, and I think I played really, really well. I was really happy with how I played, and I don't think that, to me at least, that really casts any shadow on it.
Yeah, I mean, for those that I suppose who are followers of football or soccer as well, it would be like when a team time wastes in the game, so it takes a long time to do a throw in, long time to set up for a free kick. They've already been warned by the referee a couple of times, and now they've been yellow carded. So that's kind of a fair comparison, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I have to say, I was watching the game as well from home. I was blowing up your phone that I'm sure was locked away in a safe place, saying, come on, my mate, bring it home. And yeah, your gameplay was just absolutely impeccable. As soon as that handshake comes out, because I saw obviously the initial reaction and the initial kind of fallout was you were so emotional and so passionate with the Australian flag draped across your back. How does that feel to just have that kind of weight lift off? The handshake comes out, game, it's set, match. How does that feel?
Oh my goodness. Well, look, you were talking about being nervous, and I tell you, like, I think once I sit down at the table, I'm good. But beforehand, when we were standing behind the stage and they're about to call our names out, that was the most trembling I'd ever had in my entire life. You're just standing there, and I'm like, I have to go out, and not only am I playing for like a massive personal achievement, it's also like $15,000 on the line, which is like a lot for a game of cards. Like, and I'm just like, wow, like, that it would suck to come second, but it would also really suck to come second. Like,
yeah.
And at that point, some people say second is worse than last. Like, you get to the point anyway, you go out, and then geez, like afterwards it was like, oh my God, because I guess I'd had these kind of thoughts, you just drift off and daydream, like you picture yourself on the podium, like, way in advance. And every time I would do that, I would be like, wow, like if this ever happened, like I'd be so emotional. But something in my head wouldn't really think it'd be that like far-fetched. And so anyway, then you shook my opponent's hand, and I was like, that's it. That's it. We're done.
He's done it.
And it did not sink in for weeks.
Oh, no, he was. I'm sure there were many adult beverages that were consumed following the.
No, I was under 21 and it was in the US.
Oh no, of course. Yeah. Well, when he got back to Australia, there was stubbies and God knows what else waiting for him, and undoubtedly a very, very adoring crowd as well. So then obviously the break happens, the off season happens. If the Pokemon, the TCG competitively works in seasons, so a season starts off and you work your way through, like Henry was saying before, to earn these circuit points or championship points to qualify for the World Championships. But then a funny little thing happened and the whole world shut down. How did you manage to or I suppose a better question would be, did you sort of set out initially as the pandemic started to happen and started to really hit its peak to continue honing your craft? Or did you think, you know what, actually, this is a good time for me to just take a little bit of a breather?
I mean, that's really interesting that you said that. I definitely did take a few breathers because it was a long pandemic, right?
Mm.
Now it was a long pandemic, and I think honestly it was kind of good in some ways. It was weird though because it's odd to look back and think that that was 3 years ago. Like
Yeah.
that was a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, like I look back and I was like, wow, I was like so young, but it's a long time ago, and it's weird that it's dragged on so long. Like, you know, it was weird the kind of treatment I began to receive after winning. Like it was kind of like strange to begin with, but then to have that drag on for years and years is certainly weird. And whilst it's been beneficial in many ways, it's been odd. And I did play a little bit online. I ended up, you know, trying to do a lot more maybe internet content like YouTube and streaming and things like that. But I don't think it quite stuck. And I was never fully out, but definitely, yeah, as you said, you know, had a good time to kind of take a breather from it and see how it'll go when it comes back.
Definitely. And you can find the content as well that Henry creates at twitch.tv/BenryTCG. He will
Very
be
sparingly, but
once every 3 months.
Yeah.
Well, either way, his Twitch link will be in the top of the description for you guys to go and check him a follow, check him a sub if you guys want to learn more or just check out this beautiful, handsome man. So after it's all said and done, we finally get to the end of the pandemic. And it takes a little while for TCG to announce, okay, the season's back, Worlds is going to happen. Do you think that that's been beneficial or is going to be beneficial for Worlds this year? Or do you think that actually that's going to cause some issues?
Do you mean in terms of like that there wasn't much time leading up to it, or?
Yeah, in terms of obviously with the absence of league cups and things like that being able to be held, the only major championships we've had, obviously just recently we've had the European Intercontinental Championships. We had Liverpool regionals here in the UK. So there's not been that chance for players that maybe have discovered the game over the pandemic to try and qualify and to try and come into the competitive space in at least like a smaller setting. But obviously, conversely, you've had all the players that were qualified prior to the pandemic, they are allowed to play in this World. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's going to be a lot different. I completely agree. And what's big is that a lot of the ways that people will qualify for Worlds, especially at the lower levels and, you know, just getting to day one, is through these kind of local tournaments. And due to the pandemic and I guess the companies, a lot of rules around the pandemic because they're very worried about their image and legal issues and stuff. That's part of the problem, I guess, of being a franchise as opposed to an organic, unlicensed sport. But you have these tournaments that people would get, you know, part of their qualification from, grab some circuit points, rather than perform at the more difficult major tournaments. Those aren't available. And so not only is it more difficult like that, but anyone who started recently will only have half of a season as opposed to a whole season to qualify. And that's without local events. So if you've just picked it up during the pandemic, which a ton of people have, like the player base has boomed. I go to like a local tournament now, like an unofficial one, and I don't recognize like anyone in the room. It's like crazy, but yeah, and so it's very difficult, and so that's kind of a bummer for a lot of these newer players leading up, and it does make it very hyper competitive. But I think that for the most part, people have taken it well. They know that maybe they've started and they actually don't have the in-person experience to even maybe be able to qualify, and so having these lack of casual tournaments isn't actually the worst. And they're just kind of motivated to get a start for, you know, next season. And another thing that's been different is because of the pandemic, they've increase the amount of spots for the day 2 competition. And so actually, instead of being the previous system where the second day of competition is quite small and only like, you know, I think 7 rounds of really concentrated players, and, you know, every round you're playing at someone who's just like insane at the game, right? You now have a much larger pool of, rather than 100 players, like you're probably going to have about 240, which massively changes the kind of environment and just the way that it's played, I guess. Yeah, you know, it's less prestigious, and not that's not the right word, but just the way that the tournament is undertaken is a lot different.
Yeah, Yeah, I completely understand. I suppose as well, it also gives newer players to a chance to watch from afar these high level competitors play. Obviously, on the streams that are provided in official licensed tournaments like EUIC, and of course, Worlds coming up. And speaking of Worlds coming up, you've got to be so pumped for this. The first time that Worlds has come back after, I think, the longest break in history. The first time in history as well that it's being hosted outside of the United States. Do you think that's going to affect any of the players at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll actually have a large impact on attendance. It's never been outside of the US. The only time it's been in Hawaii twice. A long time ago, like a decade ago. It's the last time it was in Hawaii. It has actually been outside the US. It's been in Canada just once.
Okay.
But that's the same continent, like, you know.
Yeah, North America. North America.
Yeah, and given that North America has the largest player base, even larger than Europe, like the whole continent, I think, roughly. Yeah. It's very, very large, and so that's always attributed to Worlds attendance. So that might, you know, throw a big spanner in the works in terms of that. I don't think that's the worst thing, given that COVID, you know, like they probably don't mind having a little bit lower attendance this year. But I think I'm really excited, honestly. Like, I mean, I'd rather travel to Europe than the US again.
Yeah.
Just in terms of what I can sightsee and have a bit of a nice trip in general. And that'll be, yeah, I mean, it'll be just a completely different vibe, having it there.
Yeah, Europe. Absolutely. And I suppose the final question, hopes for Worlds, hopes for the future. Either you, I'm guessing with what you've said throughout this interview, you are going for the double, aren't you? You're going for the back-to-back.
Yeah, I definitely have been competing less recently, and the drive is a little bit less, I guess. Like, I have more things going on other than Pokemon now. I'm a bit older, and it's I think, you know, there's only so long that I guess the pursuit of glory can sustain you. But that being said, I'm going to Worlds, and like I've been telling you, if I'm going to a tournament, I'm gonna try damn hard to win. And a lot of what I do now is I'm still obviously invested in the game, but I spend a lot more time coaching, and I think I enjoy that more and find it a little bit more rewarding. But when it comes to Worlds, like, I'm gonna try. Like I'm going, and if I win again, then that'll be sick. And I like I've said, I mean, as long as I put in the preparation and have a good day, I don't think there's anything barring me from that. And I think it's kind of nice to be able to compete at such a level. And I think playing at Worlds is a completely different experience, because your wins mean so much more, and you also need better preparation, because you know that every single round, like, you're gonna have a great match. Like, there's something about playing the game and knowing what your opponent should be doing, right? You think, oh, you know, they should do this, and then they do it, and you're like, yeah, no, you know what you're doing. And then so the win means even more, right? Because you're like, okay, this person absolutely knows what they're doing, and so I've got to play damn well if I'm going to win. And then, you know, the actually winning feels really good. And so fingers crossed we could have another good a good appearance. But yeah, we'll see how we go.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I will certainly be at the London Excel Centre, bringing the cheer squad along. Henry, thank you so much for coming to talk. It's been an absolutely fantastic and insightful interview. And on a personal note, it's just great to actually talk to you properly again, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's been great.
No worries. Thank you so much for watching this interview. Of course, like I say again, you can find Henry's Twitch link, and I'll put his Twitter link as well in there, because he's probably a little bit more active on there. Maybe once a month we get a new Benry TCG tweet. But yeah, that's it. I hope that you've enjoyed this interview. And if you want to learn anything more about the Pokemon TCG, I'll chuck a link as well to the how to play guide there. But that's going to do it. Again, Henry, thank you so much for joining us. I'll let you get some sleep now, because I imagine it is very, very late over there. And that is going to do it. Thank you.